Welcome back to another episode of 40 Facts About the 40K Universe. I am your host, Gershwan, and today we're going to be talking about humanity as we get into the origins of humanity and why you would want to play each faction within humanity in 40K. If you're new to the channel, subscribe. We post Warhammer 40K lore videos every single day. If you have any suggestions, please comment down below. And if you enjoy our content, thank our patrons on Patreon. It is because of them that we can do this. Link in the description if you guys want to support us. This video is specifically geared towards people who are new to 40K. So I hope you can share this with those newcomers. If not, just enjoy the awesome lore. But with that said, let's get into the origins of humanity. Known as the Imperium of Man, humanity in 40K has the most playable factions and is the focal point of the narrative of the game. The origins of humanity is for the most part unknown. To the citizens of the Imperium, their existence isn't something that should be contemplated. They simply should see it as a blessing by their holy savior, the Emperor of Mankind, that they are even alive. To the players and the few humans within the lore that have the power of knowledge, humanity was either created through the normal means of human evolution, or they were created by an ancient race known as the Old Ones. The Old Ones are a minor race in 40K that are going to come up a lot in this video, because they account for the creation of the majority of the races in the galaxy. We have a detailed video explaining the origins, the history, and the whereabouts of the Old Ones. At the end of this video, if you're interested in finding out more about the Old Ones, I suggest you check it out. I'll link it in the description below. But for right now, I'm going to give you a brief explanation of who they were. They were basically the first intelligent species capable of colonizing the stars. What made them so special was that they were the first to utilize psychic powers. You can compare psychic powers to magic in a standard fantasy setting. These are otherworldly powers that allow the wielder to do some incredible things. What sets psychic powers apart from the rest of science fantasy is the origin of the etheric force. It's an alternative dimension called the Imperium. Using their psychic powers, the Old Ones were able to create a path from real space into the Imperium and then back out into real space, thus achieving faster-than-light travel and colonizing the galaxy. They created an almost utopian society. And for reasons we're going to talk about later, the Old Ones eventually took it upon themselves to genetically engineer psychically powerful races all throughout the Milky Way galaxy. The common belief is that humanity is one of these races that they created. During the Neolithic era, in the early stages of humanity's existence, when they were still a very primitive people, a group of psychically powerful shamans began to fear for their lives as they felt the source of their power, the Imperium, changing into a chaotic place full of demons that wanted to consume their souls. Scared that they wouldn't be able to reincarnate, and thus no one would be left to guide humanity, the shamans decided to pool their collective psychic energies by reincarnating as a single soul in a single human body to create an individual called the New Man. 1,000 shamans sacrificed themselves to create the Emperor of Mankind. This immortal, perpetual psyker is the leader of humanity and the individual that sits on the golden throne. The Emperor quietly guided humanity from their prehistoric beginnings until they were able to colonize the stars. They were able to form an interstellar confederation and establish a basic level of control over the majority of space around their homeworld, Terra. But eventually, due to a cybernetic revolt by the Men of Iron, the rise of untamed psychers, and the birth of the Chaos God Slanesh, all topics that we have extensive videos on our channel, so check them out. We'll talk a little bit about them as we go along the history of all the other races, but just understand that those are really major events in human history, and there are videos that already exist on the channel, so check those out at the end of this video. But anyways, because of all these things, the Human Interstellar Confederation basically fragmented. This era in human history was known as the Age of Strife, and it was terrible for humanity. It lasted quite some time, until finally the Emperor decided to launch the Great Crusade and unify the ancient scattered remains of humanity into a great empire known as the Imperium of Man. Now that we have a quick origin story of humanity, we can take a closer look at each individual faction within the Imperium of Man. The most popular faction is of course the Space Marines. These are the superhuman warriors of humanity that the Emperor used to conquer the galaxy during the Great Crusade. They are genetically enhanced warriors, they are physically stronger, far more resilient, and mentally superior to most normal human beings. In the presence of a Space Marine, also referred to as an Astarte, most people feel a combination of awe and fear. They are basically demigods or angels of the God Emperor made flesh. The reason you would want to play a Space Marine army is because they are the most versatile on the tabletop, and since they're the most popular faction, they constantly get new rules, lore, and models. And then we have the standard military faction of humanity, the Astra militarum, also known as the Imperial Guard. These are the standard soldiers of the Imperium. They resemble you and me if we were thrown in the 42nd millennium and were given a lasgun. And just like you and me, the average Imperial Guardsman is just cannon fodder for the enemy. They're pretty weak. The reason you want to play the Astra Militarum is because they're the type of faction that favors heavy vehicles like tanks, and also massive amounts of infantry. Their lore, rules, and models are also updated more frequently because they're humans, and after all, humanity is the main narrative focus of the game. Next, you have the Adeptus Mechanicus, also known as the AdMech. The Adeptus Mechanicus was the human empire that ruled over the planet of Mars, but when the Emperor of Mankind unified humanity, he basically forced and threatened the Adeptus Mechanicus to become part of the Imperium of Man and supply the Great Crusade with technology in exchange for a small bit of autonomy. They use this freedom to worship technology to the point where they believe each machine has a soul. They call it the machine spirit, and the Emperor is the conduit to the machine god called the Omnissiah. This religious doctrine is known as the Cult Mechanicus, and it has shaped the faction to the point where most of its members are more machine than man. You would want to play these guys if you like the steampunk aesthetic, if you like a shooty army, or if you enjoy the concept of zealot androids. The Adeptus Mechanicus can also be further broken down into two factions, the Collegia Titanica, or the Titans, and the Imperial Knights. Both of these divisions answer to the Adeptus Mechanicus and worship the machines. They're part of the machine cult. The two factions are made up of hundreds of giant robot walkers that take on a humanoid form. Many of these designs are as ancient as the old human interstellar confederation, so they predate the Imperium of Man. They were predominantly created to help defend the colonies of humanity when they first ventured out into the galaxy. You would want to play this faction if you like the concept of elite robot walkers. You can buy 2 or 3 Imperial Knights and your army is set to go for the tabletop. The Titans, however, are a rarity in most games. Unless you're playing a large-scale game with a lot of points, you don't really see Titans. Next, you have the faction known as the Sisters of Battle, or the Adeptus Sororitas, or Sororitas. These are the elite warriors of the imperial religion known as the Imperial Cult. The cult was formed after the Emperor was entombed into the Golden Throne. We're going to get into why he is on the Golden Throne a little bit later. Just understand that for a period of time, up until now actually, the Imperium of Man was left without the Emperor's immediate guidance, and so humanity began to worship the Emperor as a deity. Although the Emperor always preached against this because he knew that worship or faith of any kind was actually feeding the Immaterium, but eventually the teachings of his godliness became an enforced belief in the Imperium of Man, and then the powers of the church and the administrative side that he established came together under one man, Goj Vandire. Vandire was basically a corrupt individual who gained control of the Imperium and formed the organization that would become the Sisters of Battle. After the leader of the Sisters of Battle, Alicia Dominica, directly spoke to the Emperor and learned of Vandire's corruption, she killed the heretical usurper, and with the help of a man named Sebastian Thor, the Imperium of Man was reorganized into what it is today. The Sisters of Battle became the defenders of the Imperial Church, now called the Ecclesiarchy. They are clad in power armor and wield the same devastating weaponry as a Space Marine. For all intent and purposes, the Sisters of Battle are basically female Space Marines. You want to play the Adeptus Sororitas if you prefer a military force with a religious theme, and obviously they're all women. Their model line is fairly new, and if you're the type of person that favors infantry, specifically elite infantry, as opposed to heavy tanks and weak mobs of men, then the Sisters of Battle are definitely for you. The last human faction we're going to talk about is the Adeptus Custodes, and like all other human factions, their origin is tied to the Emperor. They were created to serve and defend the Emperor of Mankind during the Great Crusade. They stood with him when he walked amongst man, and now that he's on the Golden Throne, the Adeptus Custodes still protect him and the Imperial Palace. They are stronger and more decorated than most Space Marines, but share a similar origin. They are genetically enhanced, but carry the gene seed of the Emperor, unlike Space Marines that carry the gene seed of the Primarchs. Each is a bastion in their own right, a sentinel of unmatched capability, and possesses a singular purpose: to counter any possible threat, whether it be human, alien, or demon, against the Emperor of Mankind. The reason you would want to play this faction is if you want to play something that's stronger than a Space Marine, but obviously it's going to be more elite. So you're going to have less models on the tabletop than a regular Space Marine army, and you're going to be limited by a smaller option of actual models. There are dozens of other human factions in the lore of Warhammer 40K, but either they don't have any representation in the tabletop, like the Imperial Navy and the Navigators, or they have too few models and the rules aren't really there to support a full army. I would recommend that you familiarize yourself with a core army and then move on to these specialist armies, such as the Inquisition and the Militarum Tempestus. And those were 40 facts on the origins of humanity. Like I said in the beginning, this is a video geared towards beginners, so if you have a friend who wants to start 40k and is interested in humanity, show him this video. Hopefully it helps him out. The reason I had to repost this is just to shorten it just for humanity, just so that you have that and it's a quick search. And also I am working on a hobby/lore video for my Orc Crusade warband, and it took me a little bit longer than normal, so I wanted to throw this video out there just so that you guys have some content to listen to. I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and I'll talk to you tomorrow. This is Gershwin with One Mind Syndicate signing out.
Always used to put my freedom first in any situation.